Hey everybody, this is David, and today I'm going to be talking about Arrow. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to be talking about Smallville, Season 7, Episode 11, Siren. So, why am I talking about this episode of Smallville? Because it kind of has some relation to this past week's episode of Arrow. Not that the shows are connected. No, they're not. They're separate shows, separate continuity, separate universes, whatever you want to call them. They are, yeah. The only thing that's really connecting them is that maybe two characters were done in different ways on Smallville. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Black Canary and Green Arrow themselves. And this is really more of a focus on Black Canary, but Green Arrow also guest stars on it. Now, let's start off with Black Canary herself. Dinah Lance is the Black Canary in this version of the character. And I'm going to admit this, I think this character, this version of it, is much better than the version on Arrow. Which is weird because I love Arrow and I'm kind of mad that I'm like putting Laurel down again, but I think the version in Smallville was a much better interpretation of the Black Canary character. Now, in this episode, she is made as an assassin for hire by Lex Luthor. And she's being paid to get rid of Green Arrow, who returns in this episode once again by Justin Hartley. Justin Hartley guest starred last season in season 6 of Smallville for several episodes, and he returns in this one episode in season 7 to help Clark track this Black Canary down. And why is he returning? Or how does Clark find out that he has returned to Gotham? Or Batman and Arrow are like, they get me confused, okay? So how does Clark find out that Oliver is back in town? He finds out that Chloe has been in contact with him and the Justice League, and that they have been keeping tabs on what Lex has been doing. And it's really cool to see the tension between Oliver and Clark, especially in the beginning, because Clark doesn't come and say a simple hello, and they make even a little joke about that when Oliver like reacts to it. Like, dude, why are you coming to me like telling me off like this? Instead, you should be, start off with something like hello or something like that. And it's true. Clark just like budges in and tells, his moral code and all this. So it's a lot of fun, once again, seeing them react to one another. And Justin Hartley is just so cool as the Green Arrow that it's great seeing Clark team up with characters like this. Black Canary is a little bit different. She is much more tougher and definitely she has morals. But the thing in this episode is that she's being tricked by Lex, that he is the good guy and that Green Arrow is the bad guy. So she's not entirely 100% she doesn't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes with Lex. She just, she's being assigned by him. She trusts him because, he's a billionaire, and who doesn't trust billionaires these days, right? With Oliver back, there's some drama. But it all starts with Lois knowing that Oliver's back, and Lois finds out that Green Arrow is Oliver. She finally finds out Oliver is the Green Arrow after Black Canary attacks both of them in the clock tower that Oliver usually hides in. And it's really cool because we see this part of Lois that we know that will be important for her relationship with Clark one day, and that she'll be able to keep a secret and see how she'll handle it. And she doesn't handle it as well as you think, because at the end of the episode, she actually does break down crying to Clark, saying that, how can someone like, how will I ever be able to be with someone like that? And it's interesting because obviously we all know eventually that she will end up with Clark, but it allows us to see how she'll grow into that role and how she'll be able to help out a little bit more with it. And I think it was great. I think it was solid. During this time, though, Clark was with Lana. So we have a little bit of drama going on because in the previous episode before this one, Lana slept with Bizarro, who, if you know the comics, Bizarro isn't what you think on Smallville. He's a little bit different. His face does turn ugly and white sometimes, but the difference is he's not as dumb as he is in the comics. If people know, Bizarro's intelligence is not that great in the comics. He ain't gonna be winning any awards for math anytime soon. But the character in Smallville is a little bit more smarter, but there's some opposites too. Like I believe one of Clark is obviously, weak to kryptonite. I believe Bizarro's weakness is blue kryptonite, which they had introduced in this season as well. So we see Lana and Clark having a little bit of these issues because, Lana slept with Bizarro in the previous episode. So that's causing some, trust issues with both of them. And for the most part, there are scenes that they make sense in the context of the show. And I guess they work. They work, yeah. This is also during the time when Lana had this company where she was helping people with powers, trying to control them, I guess, which doesn't play a factor into this episode, but I thought I should mention it anyways. But she's also spying on Lex at the same time, and Lionel tries to take advantage of that, and so does Clark to get some information about Lex. So it helps with the episode, I guess. I also like that Lex and Oliver, or Green Arrow, I should say, get into a fight at the end of the episode. And what's cool about that is that I remember reading somewhere that Michael Rosenbaum was actually the one that suggested the fight. And it was because, whenever Lex gets into a dangerous situation, he always gets knocked out too quickly. And Michael Rosenbaum said, look, I don't want to be knocked out like a wimp this time. I want to actually, hold my own for a little bit at least. And then you guys can knock me out later. And so they gave them this cool little fight that was actually pretty well done. And I'm not going to say it was the greatest fight I ever seen on television. It wasn't. But you could so tell it was choreographed, playing it safe, I guess, right? But for what it was, since Smallville doesn't do that very often, their action sequences are very simple and easy. And that's kind of one of the weaknesses of the show is the action, because it wasn't an action show. It was a character-driven show. And the special effects, were there usually for Clark, because Clark would usually use his heat vision or his super breath or lasers or whatever, and trying to keep it all under a certain budget. And action wasn't one of its strong points, but this scene was actually pretty well handled, and it was cool seeing Lex actually, going toe-to-toe with Green Arrow. And obviously Black Canary intervenes, and Clark is the last one to save the day. And it's a pretty cool scene. So for the most part, I am giving this episode an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It was great seeing Oliver back and interacting with Black Canary, especially the little Easter eggs that Smallville always throws at people. Those are always a lot of fun. And I guess one of the weaknesses for me was that it could have been a lot better, as usual, but Smallville, I think when it does a good job at being good, it does a really good job. And I think this was the best they could do with this type of story. And, Black Canary was an interesting character because I remember a lot of people weren't sure how her super cries were going to be, her siren, I guess. And Smallville embraced the more comic book side of itself during this part. This was season 7, so we were 7 seasons in. and they had been embracing a little bit more of the DC side of things. And it was really cool because, you know, if you watch Arrow, you know that Black Canary on that show is more grounded because she uses these sonic balls that will explode and shoot out a supersonic sound. And that's cool for Arrow because it suits Arrow. And I think I liked the fact that Smallville took the more comic booky approach, because now we get two different versions of that and we get to see it in two different ways and compare which one we like more. Though as a character, I am going to say I do like the Smallville version more. I think she just is naturally awesome in this episode, and she works for the Daily Planet, and that's fine too. I don't mind that. You know, some changes are always going to be made, and the show is about Clark Kent, and to see his interactions with these characters, like I said, it's always fun. So with that being said, guys, that's all. If you want to see a good version of Black Canary, I totally recommend this version, because I think Smallville did the character justice, no pun intended. Actually, that was intended, so go watch Smallville. That was a good episode.